All right, so now we're going to do a translation that's called a composite translation. So we're not going to just do one slide, we're going to do two slides. So here we have our original equation, y equals negative 4x plus 2, and it's illustrated on this graph right here. It has a y-intercept of 2, and it has a negative slope of negative 4. All right, and so what we're going to do is not just one thing to it, we're going to slide it twice. So why don't we call this original line A? All right, and then when we slide it, we're going to come up with a prime, and then we're going to slide it again, and we'll come up with a double prime. So we're trying to figure out what happens after we slide it twice. So if we're going to take this original line A and shift it down 1 unit, what would that equation be? Well, we know that the y-intercept here is 2, is a positive 2. So let's figure out what A prime's y-intercept would be. Well, if the y-intercept here is 2 and we shift it down 1, then the new y-intercept, the y-intercept of A prime, would be 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. We keep the same slope because they're parallel lines. When you take this and you shift it down 1, it's going to be a parallel line that's lower. So we keep the same slope. So A prime is y equals negative 4x plus 1. All right, now we can check that off. The next thing is then shift this new line left 2 units. All right, in order for us to shift this new line left 2 units, I'm gonna try to write a parallel line here. I know it doesn't look great, but this is our A prime, and this is our A. All right, now we're taking this new line, and we're gonna shift it left 2 units. Well, we need to figure out where this new line here actually cross the x-axis. Remember, the x-intercept is also called a root. So we need to figure out what the root is of this A prime equation, because then when we find out what the root is, we can subtract 2 from it and shift it to the left. Okay, so how do we find what an x-intercept is, or what a root is? Well, what we do is we know that when there's an x-intercept, the y value of whatever that point is going to be 0. Okay, so we can plug in 0 for y, and then we've got negative 4x plus 1. Our y value at whatever the root is going to be 0. Now we just need to figure out what that x is. Okay, so let's subtract 1 from both sides. Negative 1 equals negative 4x. Divide both sides by negative 4. And x equals 1/4. That means for A prime, the equation of A prime crosses the x-axis at where x equals 1/4. Okay, and that kind of looks right there. Okay, now that we know what the root is of A prime, we can now figure out what the root would be of A double prime. It would be 2 to the left. So we would take 1/4, and we would subtract 2, and that would be negative 1 3/4. All right, so our A double prime equation is going to cross through negative 1 3/4 on the x-axis. So now and by the way, A double prime is also going to keep the same negative 4 slope because they're all parallel lines. So now that we know what the root is of A double prime, we need to figure out what the y-intercept, or the b, is of A double prime so we can write its equation. All right, so if we have A double prime here, we know that it's going to be y equals negative 4x plus b. But we don't know what the b is. But we do know this. We do know that when y is 0, that x, the root of A double prime, is going to be negative 1 3/4. By the way, negative 1 3/4 converted to an improper fraction is negative 7/4. Negative 7/4. Okay, so we're multiplying that by negative 7/4, and we don't know what the b is yet. Okay, fortunately, we know everything here so that we can isolate b and figure out what the y-intercept is. Negative 4 times negative 7/4, you cross out the 4's, okay, and the subtraction, the negative signs will also cancel out. So we're left with 7. So 0 equals 7 plus b. Now I subtract 7 from both sides, and I find that b is going to be negative 7. That's our b for A prime. So now I can put that into the final equation, and we will have what happens after our composite translation. After we shift this original line down 1 unit, which makes it look like this, and then we shift this line to the left 2 units, it looks like this. And this is our final answer.